So, good morning to all. We apologize for the delay for this session. So we're going to begin fast. And we ask if you can be a little more, to reduce a little the time of each presentation so that we can have a time for discussion at the end. So we'll begin with EGESS TIRI from the National Center for Geocomputation, Maynooth University.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Can you hear me? All right. All right. I am EGESS TIRI, and together with Brian MORAN from National Center for Geocomputation, we're going to talk to you today about the open data quality. The infograph that you're looking at is a representation of Dublin smart cities. Tons of data are produced on a daily basis from thousands of sensors deployed everywhere along the city. Generated data cover real-time information such as transport flow from traffic lights, bus travel time, bike sharing, real-time environment data from air quality sensors, flood sensors, etc. All these data are connected with each other, and information is communicated to the citizens via different apps. Also, on the other hand, city government and citizens and planners, they are using this data for their planning and city governance. But all this comes with a cost, of course. So researchers have been trying to find out how to better organize this information with the purpose of communicating that to the users and to increase citizen participation in governing decisions, ensure increased transparency in all decision-making processes that affect daily life activities. So city dashboards are seen as a tool of doing this, and many cities around the world have been deploying a city dashboard. And as Stefan Few has quoted, dashboards provide visual means to organize and interact with data using maps, graphs, charts, GIS, 3D models, and other visual analytics that are dynamic, interactive, and interlinked. Following this line, researchers in the Maynooth University has developed the idea of building city dashboards with the purpose of addressing three main issues which go along with data production in a smart city context. So these three issues include data standard problem, analytics and modeling problems, and visualization and interaction problems. For the time being, there are designed two dashboards for Dublin and Cork. So now we are redesigning the Dublin dashboard, and we hope that by the end of the year we're going to launch the second edition of it. But as mentioned, one of the main problems to be addressed is the quality of data generated by the city for the city. We cannot give assurance of how reliable these data are. And the most traditional given definition for data quality is fitness for use. So it's important to understand that the data has to take in consideration the purpose for which they are generated and the audience and usability. So in order to reach the user's expectations and being usable by other third parties. Also, in terms of open data, parameters such as completeness, accuracy, openness, metadata readability, and usability are crucial in making the data qualitative. Although many standards, policies, and guidelines are produced and designed in terms of data quality, yet we have little assurance to say that how qualitative these data are. So Open Knowledge Foundation has defined that open data are the building blocks of open knowledge. Open knowledge is what open data becomes when it's useful, usable, and used. Also, in terms of usability, they have designed a 5-star scheme, highlighting the format data should be published in order to be machine-readable, easy accessible, and reusable for all user types. Most of the data published are in CSV file formats. And as seen in the picture on the right, a CSV file format is a 3-star level, which reveals a preferable format in terms of usability. But that doesn't necessarily mean that these data, which are the data in the CSV files, they are structured, and then we can go ahead to the further analysis without pre-structuring again the data. So, following this line, our case study will reveal some interesting findings, and we ask what makes open data smart data.
Thank you very much, EGESS. So, our case study is the housing crisis in Ireland, and by default Dublin. So, like most of Europe and North America, Ireland experienced a housing boom before 2008, where house prices rose by over 250%. But then, following the financial crash in 2008, house prices halved in Dublin. But as you can see then, from 2012, they've risen again by 52%, nearly back to pre-Celtic Tiger levels. So between 2011 and 2016, the government claims 8,800 new houses were built, representing an increase of 0.4%, whereas the population of Ireland increased by 3.7%. This is quite a large difference between the 225,000 built in the 6 years previous to that. The Irish economy has grown by over 5% a year in the last 3 years, which has led to demand outstripping supply. This has led to a huge increase in rents. They're higher now in Dublin than they were in 2008, where the average rent is €1,875 per month. This in turn has led to an increase in evictions, which in turn has led to an increase in homelessness. There's over 10,000 people homeless in Ireland. So, if we want to solve this crisis, we need to know exactly how many houses are being built. The government is saying there's enough, but it's quite a hot topic at the moment. So, there's no definitive figures for the actual numbers of houses being built in Ireland. The government uses a combination of 4 data sets, and a lot do question the accuracy as they go about counting these in very different ways. So the CSO, which is the Central Statistics Office, they are the main, they gather the census every year, and the Housing Department, the Planning Department, and ESB Connections, which is the Electrical Supply Board of Ireland, and so they count the total new connections each year. I have an example there at the bottom of the Housing Department file. I don't know if any of your data scientists, but you should see that this is not a good layout for a data set, as it's got 2 headers. So in the case study, we rank the data sets in terms of usability, readability, openness, and metadata. So the usability, the extent to which the product can be used. The readability is the data is in a format that can be easily processed by a computer. And the openness, the data can be freely used, shared, and built on by anyone. This is extremely important so people can check to see if the analysis is correct. And metadata is the data about the data. That is data used to describe the item's content. So in our analysis, we used R programming language, which is a free software programming language for statistical computing and graphics. It is used in most of the analysis in the Dublin and Cork dashboards. The task here was to load the data sets into R and perform some basic analysis on the data sets to see how easy it is to load and to manipulate. We didn't show all of the analysis here because I don't know how heavy you are into that, but please do talk to me afterwards if you want to see more. But like the first example here at the top, just to check if the values in the columns are numeric. This is the ESB new connections in the first quarter of 2011, and it says false. So it's not even numbers. So instead of trying 1 plus 2, it's trying to add x plus y. And then in the example below, just to test for null values in the data set in the CSO housing report. So the figure is, there's certainly null data sets. There's 1,090,349 null values, and which represents nearly 61% of the total. So this can lead to human error, where 0 does not equal null. It's just a blank value. So we're finding recommendations where we've ranked the data sets in scales from 1 to 5, with 1 being the worst and 5 being the best. As you can see, the CSO does quite well, but the other 3 are certainly questionable. They all have 3 stars in terms of openness and readability. However, usability is quite different. The CSO has 5, whereas ESB connections and the planning, or ESB is only 3, and the planning department and housing department is only 2. So our analysis is a bit subjective in that there's no actual algorithm to check for this. So, and we can't actually count lines of code or the time it took. So it is certainly more subjective to that. But we can easily see if it's uploaded into R, and see how easy it is to use. But with open source dashboard framework, these data sets are not entirely fit for use because they lack the necessary structure for further analysis. So the issues identified in this include the data sets not structured, making it not easy to reproduce and reuse, as in numeric fields include many null values, leading to interpretation errors and also false assuming. In a data-driven economy, the data should be machine-readable, accessible, structured, and reproducible by all. I just want to give a final end note on this because last Thursday, the 14th, the CSO released a report called New Dwelling Completions, and they have now stated that only 54,000 new houses were built in the previous 6 years compared to their previous figure of 85,000. So this is kind of validating our research a bit, and hopefully it will go on to solving the crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, EGESS and Brian, for this interesting presentation. And now we follow with Anne-Vierre et SARA DAUGBJERG with the presentation, the tree map.
Can you hear me now? So me and Eine, we're coming from Roskilde University, and Roskilde University is in Denmark. Thank you. The title of our project is the tree map, and the tree map is a study of the use of GIS in public participation in Copenhagen. So this is a study of a project that the City Council launched a GIS public participation project last year that we studied as a part of our master's program in Roskilde University. So, what we looked at was if the GIS could respond to some of the challenges that public participation, more classic public participation, has. Studies have shown that sometimes they are not that inclusive. This is a picture of a classic public participation process, which is a public hearing in Denmark. And as you see, it's mostly old people. They're probably not representative for all the people living in Denmark, in Copenhagen. And some planners have as well. Studies have shown that it's difficult to sometimes to use the information and the feedback from the citizens, from these public hearings, the classic ones, in their work. So we kind of tried to see if GIS, the GIS in public participation could answer some of these questions. The context, or the study, the project itself was about asking the citizens where they wanted new trees in Copenhagen. And trees in Copenhagen are very contested. To your right, the heart, is an action by this Save the City Trees movement in Denmark, which is, they kind of get a lot of media attention. And to your left, it's the municipality, it's a municipality sign saying trees will be cut down and kind of trying to calm people down, that this is a part of a bigger planning process. So there is a negotiation about trees in Copenhagen that is important to keep in mind in this project. It is also a part, this project, asking citizens where they wanted trees, is a part of a bigger strategy of planting 100,000 new trees. So trees are also very much a political, you know, politicals, they want attention. If people like trees, they will try to plant trees. The third element of this context is that data and GIS are more and more used as tools for in politics and in planning. This is this picture is a map of a public GIS system where the municipality shows the data they have about the city, and everybody can access it. But what we also wanted to highlight here is that there's a concept called spatially enabled society, pointing out that there are more and more geodata being used by the citizens. Everybody has a GPS on their phone. The municipality are using more and more data on their work. So this is also important to ask how they are using it.
Yes. Okay, so I'll tell you a bit about our specific case. So as Sarah told you, it's a map. And the reason behind making this map was that municipal planners and politicians wanted to know where the citizens wanted more trees. It's part of making the project of planting trees politically feasible. If you want to get support, you have to say that there's some kind of public participation in a project, although this participation might not always have been successful. It was furthermore an example of planners realizing the potential of data and maps, and how it can be used to convey a message. In this case, it was both between citizens and planners and politicians. Furthermore, they wanted to experiment with using new digital tools for public participation. So a map was published on the municipal's website, and the citizens could then add points specifically where they wanted more trees to be planted. The map was online for 14 days and received 32,000 points, which is significantly more than the normal amount of inputs for participation. It was mostly advertised through Facebook, and then subsequently the map and the data was used to in the overall strategy for future planting of trees in Copenhagen. Yeah. So our method, so what we wanted to look into was how GIS-based public participation were used in this case, and then from here look at some of the potentials but also problematics that this method can give rise to for the planning practice. Our hypothesis was that digitizing and GIS can provide new possibilities for new and improved participation, but also that it poses challenges for planners because you need the sufficient skills, and also for citizens because you have varying backgrounds which can hinder the use of digital tools. So it was a case study. We conducted interviews with city officials about the methods, the results, and their experiences and reflections. We furthermore analyzed the participation process according to some models and theories for public participation. You can see some of the models here on the slides. You probably can't read them, but it's different taxonomies for participation that kind of look into, is it just informing the public? Are they actually involved in decision making? What's the degree of the influence from the citizens? And finally, we analyzed the map based on critical cartography and critical GIS. We won't talk too much about these theories, but some of the key notions within critical cartography and critical GIS is that maps and data are not objective or neutral, as it's sometimes believed that it's a scientific representation, but rather that they're strong rhetorical tools which can be used to communicate a message. Yeah. And maps are always asking a question. Yeah, I think
we have 3 minutes left, so yeah. I'm going to do this quickly. This is our conclusions, and it's based on one case study, so it's not. It's probably not true for every public participation GIS project that it has been done, but we have. We want to point out that it can create some inclusion, having in mind that some classic participation processes can also be exclusive. So having a participation process that it's about the city, the whole city, not just the local participation processes can be more inclusive in terms of gathering more inputs, but at the same time exclusive due to this digital divide problem. Not everybody has the same access to digital tools. The second is that it promotes frictionless planning, so there's no conversation. The planners don't talk with the citizens don't talk in between, so it's very much just, you know, you just put a sign up, you just put a little dot on your map and that's it. You don't think about it anymore. You don't explain why you're putting a dot, and it's a very individual dot. So this is what we call the frictionless participation. It prioritizes quantifiable knowledge. So all this, as Aina was talking about critical cartography, pointing out that it's objective knowledge. So the subjective knowledge is not. It's difficult to include in this kind of participation. And lastly, we also want to highlight that using this in the city administration level, it requires that the planners and the politicians have some kind of reflexivity about it, because we have observed that the ones using the map, they were not questioning what the map is showing. They were just saying, this is what everybody in Copenhagen wants. There you go. And not problematizing the questions about not being the truth about what everybody wants.
Okay, so I'll quickly run through some further perspectives that our study pointed to, and which could be something we could discuss. Firstly, we concluded that GIS and data are like widespread in planning, and increasingly so. And it's often hard for planners to combine like the results from meetings, as we discussed, with their actual like planning processes. So having like the public perspectives in like a data format that they can use can be like a future potential for these forms of participation. Secondly, we concluded that, as mentioned, there is like a digital divide. Even in a country like Denmark, which is like very digitized, people have smartphones, it really varies like how much people are able to use these technologies, and that's important to keep in mind. Thirdly, we saw that maps and data give the citizen perspective like visibility. It gives like a sense of evidence, and it's more respected by planners and politicians. So it can be like an empowering force. And finally, there's the question of whether it's possible to combine quantitative and qualitative methods, so we can get the benefits from data and GIS, while at the same time including some of the more like subjective experiences and the citizens who cannot or do not wish to use digital methods. And this is something that requires further research. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah and Anne, for this interesting and pertinent presentation. We will ask if Will Brown is on the room. No, no Will Brown. No. So now we'll pass the word to Marco Allegra from EGESS, that is the moderator of this session.
Hello. My apologies because I don't feel great right now, so I'll try to do my best. So I have just a few comments, a few general comments, and a few questions.
Marco,
but it's mainly yes.
Sorry, we have 5 minutes to.
Yeah, of course.
8 minutes.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Just tell me. No, I think that you could summarize the topic of this session in terms of a debate on the technopolitics of participation in a broad sense. That is, how technology or some technologies can be used to open up the public administration, to foster participation, or an exchange between the public and the citizens. So in the case of Dublin, through open data, the city dashboard, which is aimed, I understand, not at citizens per se, but like at civil servants, analysts, business, etc., with an emphasis on startups, I think. And in the case of Copenhagen, a more traditional, if you want, or straightforward experiment in participation in the form of a GIS-based initiative for designing, for the map, the future map of trees around the city. So the key questions in this respect, which are partly addressed by the papers, are these tools effective, and under which conditions they are effective? So, and I think that not being able actually to comment on data or GIS, really, it's not my field. I think that what I think is the background against we can try to answer these questions is the nexus between planning in a broad sense. All these are experience in planning, in a way, in the rational and the deliberate effort at managing, technology and organization to administer a city. The nexus between planning in this broad North American sense, if you want, and politics. So, on the one side, we have the idea, which is, I think it's very much widely accepted also, and it's now mainstream, at least, and I think at least in the university, in certain areas or branches in the university. The idea that, there are no planning issues or technical issues, but every planning issues, every technical issue, every effort to by the public administration or all of us to have an impact is inherently political. There is no straightforward, linear, technological solution or technical issue. On the other side, I think that, and it's maybe like a corollary that it's not always so emphasized, is the question that, therefore, what constitutes good planning or an appropriate use of a technology, let's think about GIS, will continue to remain without a sort of a concise, straight answer. It's an impossible question, in a way. What is good planning? Because there is no rational answer to that. So, and this is the thing that I would like to emphasize, because planning itself as a discipline has moved from a very rationalistic, technocratic perspective toward a more politically aware, participatory model. Okay. The point is that at this point, if the idea is to promote this kind of political planning, participatory planning, etc., we have to accept what has been, what is the main conclusion of, for example, political theories that have analyzed the democratic system. Okay, that there is no example of procedural democracy. There is no political technology of representation, and this was, applied to election, referendum, to the typical areas of analysis of political science, for example. There is no political technology that can tackle per se in a positive way substantive issues. And so, where the same goes for every technical procedural device applied to planning and urban policy making in general. So, a planner should realize that the questions they're trying to answer has no real answer, but it's in a way it's worth continuously trying to answer that question. And so we should evaluate, for example, GIS-based participation in terms of what realistically it is, like a very partial effort to promote participation that is going to be always insufficient, placed against whatever ideal of a democratic society. For example, this is a typical example of, I mean, the problem that you're addressing in your paper are a typical example of the problems of procedural democracy, for example, GIS participation. It's like a re-edition of the old problems that, I don't know, theories like, one minute, like Robert Dole, for example, mentioned, okay. This is a wonderful idea that citizens participate and express their opinion, but how do you select, you know, the starting sample of citizens? Okay, so for example, which is, you know, which is a very old problem in a way that planning has come to address, precisely because planning wants to be more deliberative, more cooperative, more open, etc., etc. So, and this openness, I think it's the best way if we recognize that it's an impossible way, so to speak. Thank you.
So, thank you all for the presentations. And now we have a coffee break.